I just want to make sure that you all are able to hear me okay. Is everyone able to hear me? Is that enough? Is everyone? Let's see. Are you all able to hear me okay? Just want to make sure that the volume's working. Okay, perfect. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. Okay, welcome, welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us on this lovely Wednesday. Welcome to our Cloud Developer Tools series, Hello World, Create REST API with API Connect. So this is your IBM Cloud Made Simple Developer Tools series. Thank you all so much for joining. See, we still have some people joining. What I'd like to do to get started is I would like us all to get to know each other a little better. So we're all now part of each other's network. We're all in each other's tech community network, referral network, dev network, all of the things. So let's all get to know each other a little better. So what I would like you all to do is, if you would like, no pressure, if you're comfortable, go ahead in the chat to share your name and pronouns, your title, and either company you're with, or maybe a school or program that you're participating in, or maybe something you're learning, where you're from, or maybe where you're joining from while everyone's quarantining or working from home. And then I'd like for you to share something you love, something that's something that's important to you or that you enjoy, and then also something that's uniquely weird or different about you. So to start, while you're all taking a moment to share something about yourself in the chat, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items, just answer some questions for you all. Yes, all of the slides are available. I post them at the very beginning and the very end of the event. So if you scroll to the very top, you will have access to click on the actual links for the slides. Yes, the event is also being recorded, and it will be accessible immediately following the event at the same URL you joined with today. So the recording will be available following the event at the Crowdcast link that you joined with today. And if you would like to follow along and you would like to or do this workshop at home, you'll need an IBM Cloud account for that. This is the link to sign up for the IBM Cloud account. It's also listed in the resource links posted at the very top. It's also at the bottom where you click to register. That will take you to the IBM Cloud sign-up page as well. So if you haven't already, we have been trying to find the best way for people to check in and keep track of people at events. So if you haven't already, go ahead and click the link at the bottom of the screen that says click here to check in. You don't need to sign in or register or anything. Clicking on the link marks your registration. And while you're doing that, I will go ahead and introduce myself so you can all get to know me a little better. So my name is Jenna. I am a cloud developer advocate with IBM. Let's see. My pronouns are she, her. I'm currently joining from Detroit. So I lead the Austin Federated team in Austin, Texas, where we have a group of devs that volunteer to put on content for you all and create really cool workshops and tech talks for you all. And their full-time jobs are they're engineers on different cloud teams or technical PMs, or they work with IBM partners and clients. So something I love is a really great workshop. I really, really appreciate content. I hate reading things and trying to decipher what it is that they mean. I'm a very visual person, so I try to make the workshops that I do as visual as possible, where everything is documented. If I can't document a step for you, then the step to me doesn't exist. And then a quirk, something unique. So if you've joined any of my events before, I normally always my go-to is my obsession with tuna sandwiches, tuna salad and tuna melts. But what I would like to share today is, So something that's unique about myself, especially in the position that I'm in now as a developer, I moved from Detroit to San Francisco to attend Dev Bootcamp in 2017. And once I finished my coding bootcamp, I got really involved in hackathons and technical workshops. And I worked with a team. We actually won second place at a pretty big hackathon at a GE conference. And the hackathon was facilitated by IBM. So I thought that was really cool. That as part of your job, you could, be hands-on at hackathons, which are my favorite thing to do. So I actually ended up applying to all of the IBM apprenticeships that I could find, and I joined IBM through their tech reentry apprenticeship in Austin, and I've been there ever since. So I worked as a cloud developer for 2 years, and then I recently transitioned over into developer advocacy. So now I get to kind of design some of my own projects and work on stuff that I'm interested in and create really cool content for you all. So that's a little bit about me. I see you all posting in the chat here. So looks like we have Brooklyn, Austin, North Carolina. We have some people joining from Alabama, Brazil. I think I saw someone from Santa Monica. We have people from Atlanta. So we have people joining from all over. So welcome. And also feel free to connect with each other. We're all, like I said, we're all part of each other's network now, especially as things go to virtual. And I want to make sure that you're all able to stay connected with each other as well as myself. So there's a few things that I wanted to introduce to you before we get started. So I'm a big advocate for leveling up on your technical skills, earning badges. Badges are a really fantastic way to learn new content, and then through building applications and testing, being able to showcase that you've learned the material and earning badges so that you can level up yourself as maybe a potential candidate. Maybe you're trying to upskill so that you can work toward a promotion for work. Maybe you're trying to break into a more technical role. Maybe you're just getting into tech. And badges are a really fantastic way to do that. Nice thing is at IBM, we have a lot of these badges available to you for free through Acclaim. So, and this is also part 3 of our series. So if you missed the first 2 parts of this series, we covered the IBM Cloud Developer Tools CLI. We also covered intro to authentication and IBM Cloud App ID that handles authentication and login for your applications for you. And then today we're going to be talking about APIs, what are APIs, and then how to manage them with our IBM Cloud API Connect. So if you're just joining this series, don't worry. I'll be sending out everything after if you'd like to catch up on the first 2. So the first badge that we have here is the IBM Developer Skills Network badge. So this is our IBM Cloud Essentials V2. It's just been updated. And again, all of these are free to do. They're actually pretty great. I've worked through all these myself. The second badge we have is the Development Essentials. So this is our Cloud Application Development badge. And then the third badge we have here is the Applied Cloud Development. So this is more of a applied cloud application development. So this is going to be getting more into cloud native application development. So again, I would highly recommend. They're free. So, if you don't get to them till next year, they'll still be free. So no worries there. And if you would like to follow along, what I would recommend is clicking the link at the bottom where it says to check in for the event. That will actually take you to the IBM Cloud sign up. You can also enter in this link if you don't already have an IBM Cloud account. If you do, you could just go ahead and log in. And what you're going to need, in order to use our IBM Cloud catalog of products for you is a free light tier account. So when you go to create an account, it'll look like this. And basically you can build on IBM Cloud for free. We have over 40 light plan services. They're at no cost to you ever. And then we have different offerings too. If at any point you want to upgrade, or maybe you're using this for business that you're starting, or maybe you attend one of our conferences and you earn some credits, you can use those credits to use any of our paid offerings. But we have light plan services, or 30-day trials of most of our products in our catalog. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that I would like to do is let's just get familiar with what we're talking about here. There's nothing worse than having someone throw around a bunch of acronyms and assuming that you know what they mean. So I hope you can all see the poll. I have a first poll question available. You should be able to see it. Yeah, there we go. So the first poll question is, how familiar are you with APIs? So we have everything with responses from with what, or sure, I've dabbled a bit, or I'm an API conqueror. So go ahead and answer the poll question there. Should be a polls right at the bottom. So it looks like so far you've at least heard of what APIs are. So let's talk a little bit about that. So when we think about the web, right, as an abstract form, what you want to imagine that is you want to imagine it as a large network of connected servers. So every page on the internet is stored somewhere on a remote server. So first of all, what does API stand for? So API actually stands for, I know we talk about APIs, we probably touch APIs, we probably build APIs, but what does this thing actually stand for? So APIs actually stand for Application Programming Interface. Let's put this up while we're talking about it. Let the words melt into your brain a little bit, so that maybe we can remember it later. So every page on the internet is stored somewhere on a remote server. And remote servers aren't as magical as they feel like. They're just part of a remotely located computer that's optimized to process requests. So it's just processing requests for information. It's receiving requests that are like, hey, we need this information from you. And then the server is sending responses with the information that's requested. So to put things in perspective a little bit, you can spin up a server on your laptop capable of serving an entire website onto the web. So some of you have probably built applications and run them locally on your computer in your dev environment. So for instance, when you go to Facebook in the browser, a request is going out to Facebook's remote server. And then once your browser receives the response from Facebook, it's going to interpret the code. Let's say you're logging in. It'll interpret that code as your Facebook feed or your profile or whatever page it is that you're trying to view. So the browser is also known as the client, and Facebook's, so our what we're viewing in the browser would be the client, and Facebook's server is going to be our API, our application programming interface. So this means every time that you visit a page on the web, you're going to interact with some remote server's API. So it's just part of the server that receives requests and sends responses. So there we go. There we go. So A is for application. So it can refer, that the first application part can refer to many things. So basically any piece of software that can be distinctly separated from its environment can be an A in API, and will probably also have some sort of API. So let's say you're using a third-party library in your code. Once incorporated into your code, that library is going to become part of your overall application. So being a distinct piece of software, the library likely has an API which allows it to interact with the rest of the code in your application. Another example would be object-oriented design. So code is organized into objects, and your application can have hundreds of objects defined that can interact with one another. So each object has an API or a set of public methods and properties that it uses to interact with other objects in your application. An object may also have inner logic that is private, so you can have public and private methods. So that just means that it's hidden from outside the scope and not an API. So here are some of them in context of API. It can be a piece of software with a distinct function, or the whole server, the whole application, or just a small part of the application. So another poll. So how much experience do you all have with REST? So I just made visible our next polling question if you want to go ahead and vote there. So we have what? I've dabbled, and I'm a REST man because I always REST man. So you're pretty familiar with it. So go ahead and vote there. So we probably know what REST is, but we're not really sure what it stands for. We don't normally use a lot of the acronyms or the expanded forms of these abbreviated terms that we use. So REST is, it actually stands for, let me go here. REST actually stands for representational state transfer. So the first RE are part of the representational. So REST stands for representational state transfer. It's actually an architectural style for providing standards between computer systems on the web. So it makes it easier for systems to communicate with each other. So REST compliant systems, often called RESTful systems, are characterized by how they are stateless and separate. And separate the concerns of the client and the server. We'll go into what these mean just one more slide. So in REST architectural style, the implementation of the client and the implementation of the server can be done separately. So what does this mean? So you can essentially have, think of it in repositories. You could have a Git repository that is just hosting your client, and you can have another repository that's just hosting your server, that's just holding the code for your API. So these can be done independently without each knowing about the other. So you can change these too. Like you could have an API that has 3 different front ends, 3 different clients hosted in different places. So this means that the code on the client side can be changed at any time without affecting the operations of the server. And the code on the server side can be changed without affecting the operation of the client. So maybe you're redoing the back end, you want to get rid of PHP and switch it over to Node. You're able to do that without affecting the client side, or vice versa. So as long as each side knows what format of messages to send to each other, which this is coming from our requests, they can be kept modular and separate. So separating the user interface concerns from the data storage concerns, we can improve the flexibility of the interface across platforms and improve scalability by simplifying the server components. So the separation also allows each component the ability to evolve independently. So you can update and make changes without directly impacting the other. So by using a REST interface, different clients hit the same REST endpoints, perform the same actions, and receive the same responses. So, let's take a look at what is, here we go, statelessness. So we're talking about REST, we're talking about statelessness. So systems that follow the REST paradigm are stateless. So that means that the server does not need to know anything about what state the client is in and vice versa, like we just talked about. So both the server and the client can understand any message received even without seeing the previous messages. The constraint of statelessness is enforced through the use of resources rather than commands. So resources are the nouns of the web. So they describe any object, document, or thing that you may need to store or send to other resources. So because REST systems interact through standard operations on resources, they do not rely on the implementation of interfaces. So they're totally not reliant at all on the client interfaces. So these constraints help for RESTful applications achieve reliability, quick performance, and scalability. It's because the components can be managed, updated, and reused without affecting the whole system, even during operation of the system. So in the REST architecture, clients send requests to retrieve or modify resources, and servers send responses to these requests. So making requests, what does this look like? We have one last polling question. It's the last little bit of material we're going to go through before we get to the hands-on portion. But taking a look here, so REST requires that a client make a request to the server in order to retrieve or modify data on the server. So let's say you're logging into an application and you want to log into you're logging into LinkedIn and you want to log into your account so you can access your profile. You're going to make a request to the server in order to retrieve the data for your profile and your credentials so that you can access your profile and your resources on the client side. So a request generally consists of an HTTP verb, which defines what kind of operation to perform, which we're going to take a look at that. A header, which allows the client to pass along information about the request. A path to a resource, and an optional message body containing data. So what is CRUD? So this is our last polling question. Let's take a look. Have a few people. Okay, so it looks like we got a handful of people. Most people have dabbled a bit with CRUD. Okay, so a lot of times when we're talking about these things together in some sort of context. So usually, especially with restfulness and CRUD, we're usually talking about these things as complementing one another. So the two, REST and CRUD, these are two concepts that deal with very different levels of programming, but they actually don't compete against each other. They're very much complement one another. So in a RESTful environment, CRUD often corresponds to the HTTP methods: post, get, put, and delete. So if we talk about CRUD, we're talking about our different HTTP methods. So we took a look with REST at our HTTP verbs. So as a complement to that, we have our CRUD routes, which are going to be create, read, update, and delete. So we have the HTTP methods that coincide with those as post for create, get for read, put or patch for update, and delete for delete. So these are the fundamental elements of a persistent storage system. So CRUD at its roots is basically a simple and primitive way of manipulating information. So it's what an application pretty much has to be able to do rather than a way of going about it. So REST, on the other hand, is a high-level way of creating, changing, and removing information for the user. So CRUD is the things that it has to do in order for an application to function, and REST is the way that we go about performing those actions in a stateless way. So REST specifically refers to manipulating data through HTTP commands, and an ideology for how to streamline the relationship between the data that a user is manipulating on screen and the information that's saved to the server. So a programmer can create a REST API that handles basic CRUD functions, but building a CRUD application in no way insinuates the use of RESTful programming. Excuse me. You could build a CRUD application and in no way use RESTful programming. So I hope that's a little more clear. And then basically when we're building APIs, we want our models to provide 4 basic types of functionality like we talked about. So the models must be able to create, read, update, and delete our resources. Computer scientists often refer to these functions by the acronym CRUD. So a model should have the ability to perform at most these 4 functions in order to be complete. If an action cannot be described by one of these 4 actions, then it should potentially be a model of its own. The CRUD paradigm is common in constructing web applications because it provides a memorable framework for reminding developers of how to construct full usable models. So at its core, you're always going to have a create, a read, an update, and a delete functionality for your application. So the 4 basic HTTP verbs we use in requests to interact with resources in a REST system. Get is going to retrieve a specific resource by ID or a collection of resources. Post is going to create a new resource. Put or patch is going to update a specific resource by ID, and delete is going to remove a specific resource also by ID. So if you're not familiar with what this looks like, I have some examples here. So this is what a create request would look like. So this is also known as a post request. This is what the request would look like. This is the request that you would send to your API, and this is what the body of that request would look like. And then this is the response. So the status code we would get would be a 201, indicating that it's been created. And this is the response body we would get back, which shows that we now have an ID for this new object that we've created. Our read requests, so if we wanted to get a group of items, this is what our get request would look like. It would just go to our typically plural word that's used. Like if you were pulling all the shoes on the Nike website, might go to / men's shoes or women's shoes or something. So this would be our get request so that we could read a list of objects. So this is what our response would look like. Our status code would be 200, showing that we received that correctly and we didn't have any issues with receiving. If we wanted to send a get request, and access an item response by ID, then we would just add the ID after the previous request we saw for the list. We would just add the ID to the end of that, and our response status code would be 200, coming back successful, and the body that would come back would show the ID and the other attributes of the object that we requested. Update is going to be a putter patch. We're also updating by ID. So this is specifically by ID. And then our status code would just be 200. It's not necessary to receive a body back in the response. And then delete, we're also deleting by ID. So in our response code as well, it would be a 204. The content doesn't exist anymore, so we wouldn't have a body to refer to coming back in our response. So now that you're kind of familiar with what are APIs, what is REST, what are RESTful routes, what is CRUD, and what does it look like, we're going to go ahead and get started. So the first step in this process is to set up your dev environment. So I want to give you all just a moment to either, if you'd like to follow along, or if you're following along watching the recording at a later time, the first thing you need to do is set up or log in to your IBM Cloud account. So that's the first thing, because you will need the credentials to enter into the command line in order to get your project up and going. So I have a few, we covered a lot of this in the CLI tools workshop in the beginning of the series. I think everything's here. It might be a little cut off, but I think everything's just fitting onto the screen. You can also reference from the slide deck as well. But the first thing you're going to need to do is install the IBM Developer Tools CLI. So we have for Mac and Linux, and we also have for Windows. And then you can verify the installation with IBM Cloud Dev Help. The next thing we're going to need to do, so the IBM Cloud CLI no longer bundles Cloud Foundry CLI by default. So this is a recent change. So in order to run Cloud Foundry commands via the IBM Cloud CLI, which we will do because we're deploying a Cloud Foundry application, you'll need to also install a Cloud Foundry CLI by using the following command, IBM Cloud CF install. And then the last thing you'll need to do to finish setting up your dev environment is configuring your environment. So from your terminal, you'll need to type in IBM Cloud login, and you'll need to enter in your email and password for your IBM Cloud account credentials. If you plan to access Cloud Foundry services, which we are, we'll need to specify a Cloud Foundry org and space with IBM Cloud target --CF. We're going to go through the configuration step by step, but I want to make sure you're at least logged into your IBM Cloud account from the command line so that we can handle the configuring of our application from there. And just for reference, the installation command, these are all of the pieces that are being installed, plus the following tools. So you'll get Mac will get Homebrew, you'll have Git, Docker, Helm, kubectl, curl for Linux. And then IBM Cloud Developer Tools CLI also gives you IBM Cloud Functions plugin, the Object Storage plugin, Container Registry, and Kubernetes Service plugin, which is nice for being able to deploy to and manage your OpenShift clusters as well from the command line. So now we're going to build something. So in the first part of this, we started with a starter kit from the command line. So what I wanted to do is see how little code we can get away with writing here. So the first thing that you're going to do is, now that you're logged into your IBM Cloud account, I want to just go back and check and just make sure that everyone's good to go. Okay, perfect. So, and for throttling purposes, I've screenshotted every step of this process so that I didn't have we have too many people on the internet here. I didn't want things not finishing provisioning while we're doing this. So if you need to reference this back later, I have everything step by step. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to, from the top, you can just type in Node.js. We're going to create a Node.js application. So from the command line, from the search bar, you can type in Node.js. We're going to be accessing the Node.js Express application, not the Node.js. So this is what you can do from the search. If you also click on catalog, you'll come here. If you type in Node.js, you'll also see the Node.js Express application. So an easy, simple way to get a project started from a boilerplate, you can just click on the Express application. You'll come here. Oops, sorry. Trying to get this bar out of the way. There we go. You'll be able to click Get Started. So the starter kit will help you build out the microservice architecture, generate an application with Express.js, generate an application with files for deploying to Kubernetes, Cloud Foundry, which we'll be doing, or a DevOps pipeline. You can always add these services or change them later, and connect to provision services. So when we click Get Started, we'll be able to type in the name of our application. So in this instance, it's just Node. I just put Node.js Express app with API Connect. The resource group should be set to just your default. And this is what that looks like. So basically here you're just putting in the app name, and then you'll be able to select Create. So here's my application that I just created. So if you see here, it says you must deploy your application first. Well, we're gonna go through how to do that. So the first thing you'll need to do is download your code and put it locally wherever you want it. I put mine in a folder called, Cloud Developer Tool Series, and put the code in there. So you're going to want to download your code. And then what we're going to do is from the actions on the right, you'll be able to select Run Locally. So first we want to get this application up and running, right? And then we want to be able to deploy it. So if you look here, it gives you some instructions to run locally. So again, it says the first thing is to install the IBM Cloud Developer Tools, which we already did. This step also requires Docker. So if you don't already have Docker Desktop, you will, which is free. You'll need to sign up for a free Docker account. So you can set up your container. And what we're going to do is we're going to work through each step of this process so that it's really clear each step of what to do. So what we're going to do is run it in our local development container using Docker Desktop. And then we're going to deploy it to our IBM Cloud account. So running our app locally. So make sure Docker Desktop is running in the background before continuing. And then in order to build your application and create your Docker image, you will run IBM Cloud Dev Build. So what I want to make sure, you should already be logged in, because from the earlier steps we ran IBM Cloud Login. If you didn't already, first thing I'd like you to do is run IBM Cloud Login and just make sure you are logged in to your IBM Cloud account. And from within the directory of your project that you've just downloaded, you can go ahead and run IBM Cloud Dev Build. And once that's finished, you'll be able to run your application in a local development container with IBM Cloud Dev Run. So let me just move ahead a little bit, give you just a second so that we're all in the same place. So I know this is going to take a minute to get the images created so that you can run them locally. Let me just come over here for a second and look. So it looks like there's a few questions about the link. So the click here to check in is a general link for login that we keep track of for check-in. It'll just take you to the page to create a new IBM Cloud account. If you already have a cloud account, you can just log in. But the link is just a link for creating new accounts. So I hope that clears up any issues or anything. You don't need to create a new account. If you already have one, you can just log in. Okay. So the next step is going to be deploying our app to IBM Cloud. So I think this slide is off. Okay, so if we look, let me just go back here. So the first two steps, deploying our application, we will use IBM Cloud Dev Deploy. So that's what should be here. But what we're going to do is we're going to walk through it. So here, the first thing I've done is I've logged into my IBM Cloud account. Now what I want to do is I want to target a Cloud Foundry space. So what you'll type in at the top here is this IBM Cloud target --cf. And what that's going to do here is that's going to give us this Cloud Foundry API endpoint. And then it'll give us an org in our space, which should just be your email and basic, whatever your space in your IBM Cloud is. Mine's just called dev. So I also didn't target a resource group. So the next thing I typed in to the command line was IBM Cloud target -g default. So what that did is that just set default as my resource group. So now that we have our resource group assigned and our Cloud Foundry API endpoint, now we can, when we run this IBM Cloud Dev Deploy, we're getting this error here that says it's failed. So it says the manifest YAML was not found. So what's really nice about the DevTools CLI is that it will tell you exactly what's going wrong, and then it'll also give you the code that you need to run in order to fix it. So it says to create a manifest YAML, run IBM Cloud Dev Edit. So that's exactly what I did. So I ran IBM Cloud Dev Edit. And then here's the options that we get. So it says select the type of resource to edit for your application. So first what I did was configure continuous delivery, which we don't necessarily need to do, but I wanted to show you how to do this. So we can just enter the first selection for continuous delivery. And then since we are deploying to Cloud Foundry build packs, we would select option 4. And then we'll select a region for the toolchain. I normally just select Dallas. I think Washington, D.C. or Dallas are kind of the safe bets to go with. And then as you see here, we have a successful connection to the DevOps toolchain. So we can access our profile keys here. It looks like our DevOps toolchain for this application, it gave us just the name, the same name that I named the application, which you can just press enter and accept the name they come up with unless you want to change it. It also gives us the API key. Now it gives you a note that it can't be retrieved after it's created. So it gives you the API key in your terminal. So you want to make note of that here. And then it gives it creates a host name for the app as well. And then it shows you where the DevOps toolchain was created at. So in order to connect our app with the remote Git repo, it gives us, so for instance, if this is an application that you are looking to expand on and you already have it in GitHub and you want to connect it with the application you just have created within your IBM Cloud account, here are the steps to do that. So let's go back to this IBM Cloud Dev Deploy error that we're getting. So what's nice is that with running IBM Cloud Dev Edit, it will create the manifest YAML file for us. So what I did first was I went through the steps here and I ran our git clone. And then I ran the git config and unset command. And then when I ran the IBM Cloud Dev Edit, we want to create our manual deployment files. So with the manifest.yaml, we want to manually create our deployment files. So we can do that by selecting option 3, create manual deployment files, and then selecting from the following manual deployment target options. As you can see here, we have Helm-based Kubernetes containers. We also have native K8s containers. For purposes of the workshop today, we're just going to deploy to Cloud Foundry build packs. So that's option 1. So then it shows you the following files were added to your application. So it generated your cf-ignore and your manifest.yaml. And then we can just let's see. Okay. So we've created the manual deployment files that we needed. So we can go ahead and close out. So, if you would like to open up and take a look at the tool chain for your application, it will give you the URL to view that. And then it defaults back to select the type of resource to edit for your application. So at this point, we just type 0 to just exit out of the selection. So now when we run our IBM Cloud Dev Deploy, because we have our manual deployment files that we needed, we have our host name for our application. So I had the same host name, so I just added deploy to it just to change it. And then it automatically deploys to Cloud Foundry by invoking the IBM Cloud CF push. So I had an error here where my Cloud Foundry CLI was not installed. So within the project directory, I reinstalled it, IBM Cloud CF install. And so it told me exactly what was going wrong. So it said this failed. You need to install the Cloud Foundry CLI, which I've done for previous projects. So, but it didn't just give me an error that was, I had to go figure out. It just said, hey, you need to install this. So I went to install it again, and again, it's like it failed. And I'm like, what is going on, right? Well, I didn't have my Cloud Foundry CLI installed. So when I tried to, I needed to IBM Cloud target --CF with my, after I installed the Cloud Foundry CLI. So once I did that, and I ran through IBM Cloud Dev Edit. So this is nice too, because so when you're getting these kind of errors or you're not sure what's going on, it really can walk you through exactly what you need to do. So I ran through my IBM Cloud Dev Edit again and was like, hey, what's going on? Like, I'm just trying to deploy this. So I ran through create manual deployment files again, and we're deploying to Cloud Foundry build packs now that I have my Cloud Foundry CLI installed, which, as you'll see, it affects multiple points in the process. So I kind of wanted to show you if you get caught up on different areas, it could be just from not having that Cloud Foundry CLI installed. But it affects multiple pieces because we're trying to deploy to our Cloud Foundry build packs. So we have a manifest YAML merge. I had a merge conflict for my file because I created a file before I had the CLI installed. So what I did was I ran git diff just to take a look at what was going on. So I really just needed to merge both of my manifest YAML files because they were a little different. So a little bit of git here. So I just take a look at my git status, and then I added the files and I committed them. And then what I did was I wanted to set my current master branch upstream to where I created my project so that I could push it. So I ran, it gave me the command to run here, git push set upstream origin master. So I was able to push my updated deployment files. Okay, so now when I run IBM Cloud Dev Deploy, it says deploying to Cloud Foundry. It automatically executes the IBM Cloud CF push, and it's pushing from the manifest to my org and my dev space. Getting app info. It shows that it's creating apps with these attributes. Oops. Whoa. Okay. All right. So we have our application name, the request state, the routes, some more information. We have the SDK for Node.js build packs for Cloud Foundry. It's a web application. It gives us a little more information about it. All of this you can view in your application details in your cloud account as well. So all of this work, which it's really just a few steps, but I wanted to show you where things go wrong so you can see how to navigate and also understanding what's going on. So now we can view our hosted application at, whoops, this will go away. So it gives us our application.us south, which was the what we selected earlier, .cf for Cloud Foundry, .app domain, .cloud. So we have our successfully deployed application that we've deployed to Cloud Foundry, and it's given us the URL where we can view that. And now your application is live. So again, it's really just a few steps, but if you've installed the IBM Cloud Dev Tools, the older version, and you haven't updated them, or you are doing it for the first time, not installing the Cloud Foundry CLI can trip you up in a few steps. But now that we have our application that's live, so the few things we can do, we can view our application at IBM Cloud Dev View. We can also run IBM Cloud Dev Console to take a look at our credentials, services, and tool chains from the IBM Cloud Console. So now when you go back to take a look at your application, you have your app URL, you have your source, your resource group, your deployment target, when it was created. We have a few more options down here as well. So this part is really nice. We can connect existing services, and we can also create a service. So some examples. Let's see. I just wanted to show you the delivery pipelines and the deployment automation down here as well. So you can also access the commands here. So running the following commands in a local container from the app directory. Let me just show you from here. So you see the status here in progress. So if you want to take a look at this, when you click here, it will open up the build and deploy of your application. So you can take a look at it here. So you can see my last commit was my YAML file. Pass the build. Has a rolling deploy. So this is the part where now we want to connect our API Connect instance. Or for instance, if you came to the last workshop, you could connect your App ID instance from here as well. So what this looks like is, so I have some existing services that we could add here. So for instance, I have a machine learning instance from our Watson Studio series, where I created some custom models with Auto AI. I also have my cloud object storage. So you can add existing services here to your application. You can also create a new service. So you can create a new database. You can add Watson. I already have storage, but if you needed more, or if you wanted to add analytics, if you scroll to the very bottom, that's where you'll find APIs. So you can click on APIs here to access API Connect. You can also go back to the catalog and type in API, and the first option that'll come up is API Connect. So you can go ahead and, now that we have our deployed application, now we can start managing our RESTful routes with API Connect. So what you'll need to do is create a free instance of API Connect. So if you see here, we have the light tier option as well. So it looks like we can make 50,000 API calls per month. So unless you have a web scraper set up that's just constantly hitting something, trying to, I don't know, find Best Buy deals or something, you should have more than enough and not run out. So you'll create a new instance of API Connect. So if we scroll down, you can see the other plans we have here. And then at the very bottom, we also can see here that light plan services are deleted after 30 days of inactivity. So if you create an instance of App ID or API Connect and it disappears due to inactivity, you can always just create another one. If they're inactive for 30 days, they just get deleted just to not have processes running. It also will pre-populate a service name for you. So you don't need to, I normally just leave the inputted names that they have here. And when you create your new instance of API Connect, this is kind of the view you'll be taken to. And when it's done provisioning, it'll give you a message that says API Connect has recently been upgraded, and this is kind of your dashboard for API Connect. So I want to take a second. Okay, so I just want to make sure everyone's still good. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I like to make sure you all have access to the slides so that if anything freezes or if it's blurry, you still can view it on your own there as well. Okay, so now we have this instance of API Connect. So I'm going to just give you kind of an overview of API Connect and an intro to get you started. Okay, so if you click on this little arrow here next to the dashboard, these two arrows, drop down menu, I want you to go ahead and click on, since we're in the dashboard view, go ahead and click on drafts. And now, as you see here, we have products and APIs. We're going to start with APIs. We're just going to create a new API. What's nice to note here is that you have the option of creating an OAuth 2.0 provider API. You can create an API from a SOAP service. You can also import an API or a sample. So what I'm going to have us do is just create a new API. Let's just keep it simple. I just called it API. Doesn't need to be fancy. As you can see here, when we scroll down, we have the name, the base path, which is automatically generated for you. That's already input in there. And then the version, so the version should just be 1.0. And then if you scroll down, you can create an API using the template. I just selected default. You don't have to. And then the next step we're going to do is add the client ID, identify using client ID security. And enable cores was already pre-selected, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave that in there as well. And then we're going to create this API. So when we create this new API, we you'll see here in this this API design view. So we have the info. We can also put schemes in here. We have our host, our base path, what it's consuming, the life cycle. We have security and different properties. What we want to do first is add a path. So for this application, I just put /health. If we look back at the examples that we looked at a little bit ago, for instance, this could be for a restaurant example. Our path would be, dishes, or wherever we're making our GET requests from. So the next thing we're going to do is, since we're here looking at our API designer, we can click on assemble. So when you click assemble, and now that you've created this new path, let me just, okay. So when you click this plus here, this is where you're going to create your new path. I think a slide got moved. Yeah. But when we click on assemble here, it's going to take us to this view here. So we have a lot of different logic here, different, oops, just a moment. Button got clicked. Go back to where we were. Sorry about that. Create our new instance here. Okay. All right, perfect. Let me just make sure you can still see. Okay. Okay, cool. Yes, and if you have to run, don't worry. Feel free to come back and watch the rest of the recording. So we're going to go ahead and move over to assemble. And if we click invoke here, it's going to open up this window over here. So there's two things that we want to do here. So we can give it a title. You don't have to. But the two things that we need here are the URL, right? So for instance, in our example, this would be the myrestaurant.com URL that we were looking at. So our GET request would be myrestaurant.com/dishes. So our myrestaurant.com URL would go here in the URL section, and then /dishes we already created the path for in the last step. So if we scroll down here, the next part is going to be designating which HTTP method. So for this, we're just going to do a GET request. So we put our API endpoint URL. We've designated our HTTP method. This is going to be a GET method, a GET request. And then for the cache type, you can go ahead and select no cache. So now what you'll want to do is you'll need to save it. So you're going to want to make sure to hit this little button up here. And it got cut off a little bit, but it shows that it's been saved. Now the next piece we want to do is to click on this arrow here. This little arrow next to the search bar. Oh, there we go, API saved. Perfect. Well, I guess we moved over here. Okay, so before we go over here and finish up this, what I want to show you is how to create a new product. We've created our API. If we want to create a product with our API, what we can do is we can go back, clicking here on the drop down. We can click on our drafts. As you can see here, we're back in our drafts now. So in our drafts, if we click on products, we can add a new product here. And you can give it a title. The name's generated based on the title. And then you have some information here about this new product that we've created. If you click on APIs, now as you can see, it says there are currently no APIs included with this product. If you click the plus sign, what we can do is we can select our API. So we can select the APIs that we want to include in our product, but with just a click. So I only have one API, but let's say you have a number of APIs that you've created and you want to include it in a product you're working on. You can do that from here. And now, as you can see, our API is associated with our new product that we created. And then you're going to want to remember too here, you're going to want to remember to do two things: to save here and to validate here, which is with the little arrow. So the first thing we're going to do is save it. So our product is saved. The next thing we're going to want to do is validate it. So as you can see, it says our API version 1 has been staged in the sandbox. So that's that little arrow that we clicked on. We made sure to validate and stage our API in our sandbox. If you remember, the sandbox was the first thing that we looked at in our dashboard. So let's go back to our dashboard, and you can see our sandbox here. And now we have our API staged in our sandbox that we created. So we have this sandbox here that we can do a number of things in too. So I went ahead and went back to our drafts from our sandbox by clicking this arrow up here. And when I click on the APIs, I want to go ahead and finish creating our RESTful routes in our API. So you can go ahead and click on your API. And we already have our path that we created. So in the example, for instance, it would be /dishes for our restaurant. Now, if you look here, do you see this little checkbox here? This is your validate for your API. So now that we've saved it, we also want to validate it. So once you've validated it, it'll say validation complete. Now, when we come back here, when we click on this arrow, we have our setup. So choose a catalog to test within. So we're going to test in our sandbox. So now that we've got it all set up, we can select our API. So we have our API product that we've created here. So we have this API 1.0. This is the product that we just created. And now if we go forward to the second part, let me see if this arrow pops up here. This box goes away. Okay, so there's an arrow here that goes forward to the next page. Excuse me. The next page, we are going to choose an operation to invoke. So what I chose is the get operation here. So this is get health for my application. In the example we used, or examples you would use, this would be the get dishes or get, men's shoes. Getting the request, sending out the request to get the response for our read request. When we scroll down, so our content type is, we're gonna send the request as a JSON request, and I would like a JSON request back, and then we can go ahead and click invoke. And then we can go ahead into our sandbox, and I have this open too, so we can click around and check some things out together too. But if we go back here too, so we have a get request. So this can essentially manage all of our CRUD routes for our application, even outside of our 4 necessary RESTful routes that we have. So I have created the get request here. We can also have our post, our put or patch, and our delete. One thing I would like to show you is if we go inside our sandbox here. So if we click over here on the gear icon, we can take a look at the overview of our sandbox instance we have here. And if you click on portal, what you can do is you can select a portal. So I selected here IBM Developer Portal. And what's nice about this is if you're working with other people or a team or a group of people, you essentially have a URL to your sandbox here. So you have, if we scroll down a little, your user registry for your sandbox. This allows developers, so this allows other developers to invite people to collaborate and assign the following roles. So viewers can only view applications and application activity. App developers can create and edit applications, manage client keys, and subscribe to plans. So if you wanted to work with a group of people and have a sandbox to test your API calls and work on building out your applications and managing all of your API requests, this is a sandbox that you can do that, and you can use it with a team of other people as well. So congratulations on doing a great job hanging in there. I know it was a lot of material, but you've essentially learned about what APIs are, how to create RESTful state for your application, how to create your CRUD routes, how to build and deploy an application to IBM Cloud, and then how to start building out your RESTful routes within your application, and also allow other developers to collaborate and work with you within your own sandbox to test out your API calls. I want to just go here for a second. Yeah, let me do this for just a second. Okay, so let me share screen. Here we go. All right, so here we go. I might need to refresh this. What? Might have had a timeout. Here we go. Okay. Just want to take a peek around our sandbox here and just kind of show you what we have here. So we have our different products. So we have this product that we created that you can see was staged about 8 hours ago. There's also requests for approvals. So if you're working with a team. So we have developer organizations, applications. We have this test app here. We have subscriptions. Here we go. So we can add users here. So if we want to work with a team of people in our sandbox and work on our application, we can actually add our users here. And let's go here. Okay, so here's our sandbox here. So we can invoke our APIs here as well. And you as a team have your own sandbox to work in to manage your API for your application. So for instance, with certain programming languages or APIs you use, sometimes they have a sandbox for you to work in and sometimes they don't. So let's say you built your own application. Now you have your own sandbox to play around with and test out your different calls for your own API, which is really nice. It normally the default go-to is Postman to test your actual calls, but it's not a sandbox environment, right? Like it's not a sandbox environment for you to especially work with a team. Go here. Okay. Yeah, so I just want to use the restaurant example as yeah, I use the health application as the application that I created from the IBM Cloud starter kit that we had, but I use the routes from the examples we use just as a reference point, just to try and make it a little easier to understand. Okay, so okay. Hopefully, yeah, I know there seems to be connection issues from time to time. Yeah, I think that I fixed all of my bandwidth issues earlier and got everybody off before I started. So that, let me just see here. So can the Node.js applications be spun up and retired based on demand? So let's see. What can be done to put a load balancer in front of your Node.js application? I don't have an answer for that at the moment. Let me, I can definitely look into these questions tonight and get back to you. Post your answers on here, Bill, if that's okay. I want to check on a few things and get you a fully formed answer, fully worked out answer. Let me just see here. Let's see. Oh, let's see. Application Chrome. There we go. Yeah, so I hope that that's a good intro to getting you all started. I wanted to show you that you could start an application from a boilerplate if you need some place to start with creating your application and your RESTful routes. but also show you that you know, you essentially can have your own sandbox to test and work with your own APIs that you build. So I have all of the resources listed at the end here. Let me come back here. I want to give you all time to ask any questions that you may have. Let me posting get requests here. Show up via the API. Let's see here. So, okay, let's see. Let me go back to my API. Just a second. Oh. Let's see. Okay, so we come here. So what I did was I'm going to come back to drafts here, and I'm going to click on APIs. I'm going to come to the API that I just created here. So we have paths here. So if we want to add more paths, so for the API Connect, I'm working on another application for this because the previous application had been deprecated and the pieces had been pulled apart. It might be a vague way of putting it, but I basically have to put them back together. So I use the health app as an example, but for instance, if we had we could create any of our paths here. So if I had the example that we were using for the example that we were using earlier, if we had our restaurant.com application, we could add our paths here under paths, and then when we come to I need this one. We come over to assemble. So if, for instance, if this was our restaurant.com URL, we could change this to a post request, a put request, delete. We can change any of these in here. and save this. And then when we click on the arrow here and open this up, we could go do a GET request to our new, if I created a new API for restaurant.com, for instance, then I could do a GET request to the API. I could choose the operation here. So I just added this path, so now I can access the path from the operations here. Still submitting a JSON request and getting a JSON response, and then I could invoke it here. Guess I can check if let's see. So I have all of the resources again at the end for you. So we have our IBM Cloud certifications. Let me post this for you guys again as well. So these are and then the badges as well. One thing I would like to share as well, let me fix my share screen because it's kind of all over the place. There we go. And if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and post them in the chat while I pull this up here. Okay. And I would like to encourage you all, don't be shy. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions at a later date. If you would like to connect on LinkedIn, I also have my other workshops and tutorials and things on YouTube as well. Two things I would like to share. Let me just grab the link for you here. We are having okay. Let's go up here. Okay, so we are having a Cloud Native Developer Summit. It's going to be next Tuesday. I want to encourage you all to come. Let me just copy the link here. They just posted for this. It is free to attend. It should have some really great content. So if you would like to attend the Cloud Native Developer Summit, I would highly recommend you all check it out. We have it posted in our San Francisco Bay Area meetup. I'll be updating the Austin meetup as well, but if you want to register right now so you don't have to remember later, there's the event listing for the Developer Summit. Again, it's going to be next Tuesday. Let's see. And if you have, like I said, if you don't have any questions now, but you have any later, please don't hesitate to contact me. Also, don't hesitate to ask questions in the Ask a Question in the Crowdcast tool here. I am going to be getting back to Bill. So if you think of some questions later tonight or this weekend that you want to ask, please feel free to post, and I will get back to you and post answers here for you all. I want to give you some time if you have any questions. But again, I just want to thank you all for coming and making this event per usual, like all the other ones, fantastic, with all of your interactions and really engaging in the chat. It definitely makes the events better for me and for everyone else involved too, to be able to engage with all of you. But feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions at all. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn and YouTube as well. If you want to check out the other 2 parts of the series as well, you can do that on YouTube as well as on Crowdcast. And I will be sending out a follow-up email on Friday with all 3 of the recordings and all of the resources. So if you missed any and you want to catch up, watch out for that email because I'll be sending out to you. Take some time to think of questions if you have any. I'm going to put a little outro music on, but I'm going to be hanging around. Let's see. Where should we ask questions? Okay, so the best place to do that is either in the chat, or if you look at the bottom of the screen, it says ask a question. So you can post a question in the ask a question here. And if it requires me getting a more in-depth answer for you, I can do that and post the response there as well. Let's see. Ask questions. Yep, in the chat or in the ask a question. Sure. Yes, you can ask questions at any time. If you want to ask a question tomorrow or during the weekend, feel free to do that. If you want to take some time to work through things and then post some questions you have from what you worked through, feel free to do that. I'll be checking this. I'll be checking the questions this weekend as well, so that I can get back to anyone that has some questions. And if you have anything else to follow up with, feel free to contact me on LinkedIn or post comments on YouTube as well. All right, well, if you don't have any questions, or if you're taking some time to think about them, don't worry, we'll still be here. For those of you who don't have any questions and you're about to wrap up your evening, thank you so much for coming. I hope you have a fabulous rest of your week and an even better weekend. And hopefully we'll see you at the Cloud Native Developer Summit next Tuesday. I'll be there. I'll see you guys there. And we'll see you at our IBM Watson series that we're going to have coming up in November also. So take some time, think about your questions. We'll be here hanging around to answer some of those. And we'll see you next time. And thank you all so much for coming, and we'll see you next week. Have a great weekend.